I've seen so many cases where people like your water completely with the thing that flipped me around. I had cancer and I struggled with it, and then I started drinking the water and the cancer cleared and I'm like, no, I'm like, that was the foundational piece you were missing. You were already doing all the other 6 or 7 factors correctly,
Hmm.
but you didn't have it on a good foundation. As soon as you slid that foundation in there, the system started to roll and you felt it right away. And then you got
Welcome to the Deconstructing Conventional podcast. This interview is brought to you by Healing United, a private membership association committed to helping you reclaim sovereignty over your health, life, and future. You could say our tagline is question everything and rebuild intentionally. In the audio format of the show, there's additional commentary before each episode, and there are also over a dozen audio-only episodes. You can find the show anywhere you listen to podcasts, including the Healing United PMA app. Look for it in the App Store, and if you want to learn more about the work we do, and especially how we help people heal when the doctors have no answers, visit us online at healingunited.today. Now, on with the show. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. My guest is Jonathan Butts, and he is the CEO of Natural Action Technologies. And so some fascinating background on this guy. He graduated from the Naval Nuclear Power Program in the mid 1990s and began a career in industrial machine design. In the last 20 years, he has designed, built, and tuned hundreds of large-scale machines serving several different industries. Quite impressive. The automotive, agricultural, steel, aeronautics, and aerospace industries. And then this next sentence is one I want to come back to because I sort of understand it. But so in 2007, John began evaluating water for use as a supplementary efficiency improver in thermal processes. So improving the efficiency of water when related to temperature somehow, and then began designing and building water plasma generators. So during the process over the next 5 years, he observed remarkable properties and behaviors within water while analyzing it. And the realization from his observations led him to shift focus to biological functions, with water always being the primary regulator of electricity. Interesting. And then he recognizes water as a fundamental ingredient in all matter in life. In 2010, he helped start Natural Action Tech and became the CEO and owner in 2018 and founded the American Water Trust in 2020. So, John, what a fascinating background you have. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's great to be here. It's been fun and exciting, and I think at a young age I got onto a lot of this stuff, and it's kept life exciting and kind of gives you kind of gives you a rabbit hole to always run down.
And I know every time you study nature in any depth, your mind continues to be blown at what you don't know. So before we start geeking out on water, just tell us a bit about your origin story. How did you end up at the Naval Nuclear Program, and how did that lead you into studying water?
I think that one just came from wanting to get a better education than was offered conventionally. My dad was an industrial chemist who turned engineering contractor, and so he built machines, so custom machines for steel metallurgy. So there's that whole background, right? From a really young age, I was kind of surrounded by that. And then on the flip side, I was always more of study the atom, study the universe and how it works from a really young age. I didn't think it was odd back at the time, but I guess looking back on it, not too many kids are interested in discussing unified modeling, at 10 years old. But my dad did a good job of kind of admitting that science really doesn't know a lot of this stuff and you got to go figure it out yourself. So one way to go figure it out was, okay, nuclear power is seriously more efficient than any other form of power generation we do, maybe besides hydroelectric power plants. So I just wanted to know firsthand how all that worked. To me, it was fascinating that a softball size rock could power a city for a few years, so I wanted to really get the reality of that and see if that was in the future at all.
Wow. And how did that lead you into studying water then?
Water, I think for me was more of a fishing nature type thing. So I was also grew up on a river and a canyon, so fishing and watching water, but I never was able to tie it to science because the science didn't address anything that the water was doing. And also nuclear power is regulated by water in the types of plants that we worked on. So water was always in the picture, right? And then you start to think about it and you're like, well, no matter what you do and how you do it, if there's going to be power, there's going to be water present, or biology, there's going to be water present. So no big surprise there, but it was kind of a surprise to me that water was the sole regulator of a thermal nuclear reactor, not other reactors. But what that means is if you lose your cooling and your radiation shielding via burning steam, the reactor shuts itself down. So it's inherently safer type of reactor because if water isn't present, it won't run, where the other reactors kind of run away with too much heat when the water turns to steam. So some design principle there and how things are done and the smart way to do it, and how water is the most effective radiation blocker. So when they shield the primary plant, you got a tank of about 4 feet of water around the reactor, and it does well with neutrons and gamma and all the different types of radiation that are present. Whereas like metals, only like a few metals work good on neutrons and other ones don't. And so all these other elements are not diverse in their radiation blocking ability, but water is actually pretty phenomenal with it. And something we didn't learn back then in the nuclear power, but we know now, is that when you subject water to radiation, it begins to transform itself to block it more. So it's morphological. So that's the real cool part. That's the second half of the water study, is this stuff's alive or intelligent or conscious or something, or all three of those. And we don't really understand how it responds because it's a bit more intelligent than we are.
Well, so one of the things I did in kind of researching to understand this interview, or just get my head around the concept of structured water, is you have a series on your site called Structured Water, Is It Worth the Hype? And I think you were responding to an article about that particular topic. But I guess let me see if I can lay some conceptual scaffolding here, because as we as humans, we go through the life and we have this mental framework of these stories or these narratives we use to frame reality. And sometimes, like for me at least, I ran into this topic of water and I didn't quite have the structure to understand it. And one of the things you pointed out was that when we talk about water, typically we talk about it almost strictly from the biochemistry angle. We think of it as H2O. It's okay, we know the chemistry of it, and it's solid, liquid, and gas, and we kind of stop there and we feel like we've defined it. And what I liked about your article is almost like you helped me look at the elephant from different angles. I'm not just looking at the butt, I'm looking at from the side or the top or the front, and really almost like one of the things I interviewed Andreas Kalker, and as I started looking into his work, he talked about, I think of chlorine dioxide as a biochemistry equation, and he's a biophysicist. He looks at chlorine dioxide from a physics, and he says really everything is more about voltage. And I think I picked up similar themes reading through your work. And my understanding is you look at water from not just from biochemistry, but from magnetism and electricity as well, more in a biophysics puzzle, which was fun because it gave me new scaffolding to our new pegs to hang information on. And we kind of think of, everybody knows the term EMF, electromagnetic frequencies. And we know that those things are real. We see lightning, and we know a compass works, or we have a cell phone that somehow is transmitting signals. We know we put water in the microwave, it gets hot. So there's something, there's magnetism and there's electricity and there's chemistry. And if we step back and we can appreciate water from that lens, it helps us, I guess, more broadly appreciate what water is. So I guess is that a reasonable frame from which to begin the discussion? Or is there anything you'd add to that?
It's super reasonable. I would go on to say that no matter what science field you're in, if you're not proper with your basic electromagnetic physics, then you are going to struggle your entire career to properly explain what's going on from terms of biological health, from construction, from engineering. A lot of things that we think are electromagnetically inert, they're absolutely not. And since the Wi-Fi and the cell phones, everything is subject to being an antenna. Those vibrations are rattling in everything, especially metal, because it's a conductor. So it doesn't really resist. It absorbs all that vibration. And you can actually measure it on things like when you get a root canal, that antenna is a pretty good size, the right size for picking up millimeter waveforms and harmonics. So, anybody with a piece of metal in their body that's short, you're going to pick up those wavelengths like a lot more than somebody else. So your worldview changes when you realize everything's connected almost as a solid, but then separates through, what we would call the manifest world or the more biological world. And most of that separation done is actually by water. You really don't see biological life without water. And when you're talking about a cell, which is the first ordinate unit, even if it's a cancer cell or an algae cell, not a lot going on inside as far as, eukaryotic biological cell of a human being, right? There's not a whole lot of DNA going on there yet, but there is. And the current understanding of all this is going to come down that the RNA, DNA, root foundation is actually probably in water, not in the protein, and it's water that forms the protein to begin with. So if you just had a cup of water, then and the right circumstances are present, and it's not what people think, the dark will form life initially a lot easier than the light will. The sun will kill a lot of things that aren't ready to come about yet. So, kind of like the womb of all matter, that's where I would go with it in the end.
Okay, well, let's step back and let's try to define our terms, because as I've studied or looked into this topic of structured water, I found a bunch of different terms. So there's things like structured, obviously there's hexagonal, there's crystalline, magnetic, ionized, functional, there's even levitated. And I found living, which was interesting because it made me think of the Bible. I looked it up. I think there's about 10 times the Bible says living water. And I thought, well, shoot, maybe I read over that. Maybe there was something more to it. Like I could have left the adjective out. It could have said cold or tasty or any number of things, but it said living water. So basically what I understand is all the different terms I just listed are just different ways of people looking at the elephant, looking at water from different angles, trying to describe what they're observing. But essentially it's more structure, or it's just a recognition that there's more to water than what we had originally thought. Is that right?
Yeah, more coherence is the implication of structured water. However, structured is such a generic term. That's all they're implying, is that they're changing the structure so it's more coherent,
okay,
or more organized, or more, and that is true, but there's no magnitude in that, right? It's just generic. It's kind of like, what does that mean, right? If we start talking about fractal antennas, that's structured water, that it becomes a fractal antenna and you can measure the fractality, then structured water starts taking on a actual definition, right? Where it's becoming more articulate rather than more confusing.
Okay. Got it. Well, one of the definitions I think I read in your work was you defined it. So we'll probably just use the term structured water as we go forward, just to be simple. Fine. But yeah, so you referred to it as water with a structure that's been altered to form a hexagonal cluster. And this cluster of water molecules is believed to share similarities with water that one hasn't been polluted or contaminated by human process. So it's kind of like a two-part definition. There's a hexagonal structure that you can observe, and the second, it's not polluted or manipulated. Is that overly simplistic? Anything you'd add to that definition?
Well, there's more than just hexagonal. The hexagonal is probably just on the exterior and what Gerald Pollack calls the easy layer. So that's like, let's call that an eggshell, right? And that's the force field around the body of water that always takes the shape of the container.
Okay.
And then when water's frozen, it hits its maximal at about 30% hexagonal as it is frozen, right? And so it takes a leap when it freezes and jumps up in that number. So hexagonal water is a portion of the structure of the water, and the higher degree you have of that hexagonal lattice, probably the more structure in 1 degree, but that doesn't mean that's better for the application. So you cannot say more structure is better, or you might be able to say more coherence is better for biology, for life. But if I was using an industrial process, I might not see the coherence as important. I might want to program that water just to be a better solvent, right? Which is different than biological water. So now we start getting into like diversity of water and its purpose, role, and function. And actually, in my experience, if you teach or train or ask the water properly, you can get it to do some things that science would say is completely impossible. And all you have to do is just be gentle and incremental and do what you would do if it was a person in your changes, right? I want to go from benching 180 pounds to 300. How do I do that with water, right? It's same way you do it with a human being. It's a couple pounds a day with a lot of rest and being patient, and eventually you'll get there. And that's precisely what I saw with water in industrial development.
Wow. Okay. So, well, give me some examples then. So what are some of the things you have done to or tinker with, or how do you
kindly nudge water to behave in a particular way?
It's really simple, just like so let's just say I had I wanted conductivity in the water, which water doesn't have much conductivity. It's more of what they call a dielectric, meaning it can stop flow or allow flow based on the conditions around it. It's kind of a dielectric, like a semiconductor, same way our computers work, right? It's the same electrical physics going on there. It's a crystal, but this is fluid, so it's always changing, and it's changing to its inputs and environment, right? It's not pinned down or isolated so much like a computer crystal. So let's just say I wanted it to be more conductive and didn't want to put something in it to make it conductive, but I had to start that way. So we put 2 pounds of a salt conductor in the water. Well, what I can do is take that 2 pounds and make it 1.9 the next week and 1.8 the next week. And the electrodynamics or the electrochemistry would say that the water will conduct X with X amount of sodium hydroxide in, or whatever salt we want to put in it. Doesn't matter. And we get 10 amps of current. Well, after a month of training it, letting it rest, so you change the parameters, let it rest for 24 hours, come back the next day, run it again, you could probably get from what would have been required to be like 10 pounds, you can probably get it down to about 1 pound. So now you start to see this behavior of mass reduction and violation of the bandwidth of the laws that are created by our conventional chemistry and physics, right? And it's not that people haven't known for a long time. It's just with the way our society is, that would become secret in a corporation, and misinformation created about it to protect it so you could benefit from that idea. And you would, if you're the people who mine the earth and sell the material, you're never going to want to tell people about like homeopathic process and the role that water plays in that, right? But it goes beyond like just, medicine for yourself. You can do it with equipment too. The same principle is there. It's just intention and water. And if you approach it correctly, this is more unified physics, I think, but water just displays it overtly. Then you can make changes that aren't possible and achieve efficiencies that aren't possible. But that would take special knowledge to demonstrate, but it's very repeatable stuff. And then the demonstration of water in its vapor form visually with a person present is a no-brainer. So you're already getting exposed in the presence of these situations where you can start doing the really obvious weirder stuff, which is not true of like drinking water, biologics, or water cleanup as much as like stuff like this. We're talking about extremely powerful substances in the water vapor and implosion properties, which I've always been curious, because all they teach is explosion, right? Which is separation mechanics. And they never really spend any time on implosion, and nor did I read a lot growing up about any industrial process that really used implosion. I heard about it like when tanks cool down too soon and crumple. The tank will crumple like a pop can when you cool it down too fast, or like when you get a phase change from a vapor to a liquid. It's, with water, that's about a 1700 fold change in volume. So steam to a water droplet's about 1 in 1750. And ironically, I can reference another thing. Most people don't think about this, but if you go mechanical and we rip down the universe into its building blocks, the building block of the universe is the electron, and that exists by probability. So you start out with half of the time it's there, half of the time the electron is not there. Then you end up with the neutron and the proton forming the atom surrounded by this electron cloud, and the neutron and the proton, whichever one it's going to be, is about the exact same relationship as a drop of water to steam or water vapor. Water vapor actually is a little bit more than steam in the charge sense. It's 1850. Steam's about 1744, I think, right around 1700. And in the end, when you look at this scenario, the electron to the proton is the same thing as a drop of water to its transformation into steam, volume wise. And then there's a weight, 1 in 1800 too, that's inverse of the volume, right? So
You definitely brought the biophysics angle back into the topic of water. It's not just this chemical reaction. I love that there's so much depth in the ways we can look at this. And so let me see if I can clarify one other term. You mentioned plasma. That was the sentence I read earlier that I didn't quite have my head around. I think it was you that said plasma sometimes is the term we use when we don't quite know what we're looking at. So what is water plasma, or what's a water plasma generator?
So that it's very simple. It's similar to Faraday electrolysis, except you don't separate the gases. Duh, like get away from the separation technology, right? So if you just they call it common ducted electrolysis, and what you observe in this situation is if you don't overpower the water, right, the water becomes aggressive and destructive if you try and extract more by force out of it. So if you use finesse to phase change the water, so what happens is when you put voltage across the water, it only needs millivolts for certain reactions we've actually verified. So, but if you want it to happen right now, like a mechanic, industrial, I'm going to step on the gas and I want to go, it takes about 1.3 volts. You actually run a little bit more than that to cover for conventional electrical losses. And then there's water bubbles that go to the plates, which is conventionally referred to as hydrogen and oxygen.
Okay.
And but the bubbles were really formed straight out of the water in the overlap period between the two opposing charges. So two charges can oppose each other that would normally create a short or dissolve each other by an explosion or by draining all the energy out of the system. Like if you short a battery out, right, a big spark and the battery's dead all of a sudden. Drain your battery fast. So basically what happens here, if you treat water as a battery and you go gentle with it and you let it rest, as we talked about, it keeps transforming to more and more efficiency. And then it gets stuck in a transition state between a vapor and a liquid. And that's what we call plasma, is the transition between phases. Science hasn't defined it this way, but I'll take it from them and just do it because it's ridiculous that we can't come to a simple conclusion that word really doesn't mean anything. And marketing likes to make it think it, like quantum. Oh, like defining something as something new. Quantum is nothing new. It should be subquantum in marketing because we're actually trying to define things that we can't. Plasma is one of them, and a transition you can't define because it's always changing. You can describe the method of change, but you can't really define what state it's in because it's in a non-state. Some physicists claim that it's in a pure electronic state, meaning everything is electronic at that point, an electron. But then unfortunately, then you have to define the electron to know what that is. And since the electron's only half there and half not there, we can only define it half of the time. That's no definition at all. That's a guess.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Well,
there you go.
I guess what I like is that you've allowed for mystery to stay in the equation and to recognize our limitations as humans to understand all this complexity, and our reductionist thinking doesn't always work.
Yeah, sometimes we got to realize there's stuff that's beyond our perception, and there always will be. And if there's not, life would be terrible.
Right. Okay. Well, let's stick with some of the I guess what we can observe and define. So one of the ways I think I've heard water described, or differentiating what we're calling structured water from other, is just there's the way that water moves naturally, and then there's pressurized water. So is that a framework we can work with just to kind of start getting more into?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So one of the books I'm sure you've read or heard about is by Andreas Schultz. It's called Water Crystals: Making the Quality of Water Visible. And so, I'm sure you know, he went all over the world just collecting natural water samples and tap water samples. And what he found was that tap water anywhere in the world, always when he was able to crystallize it, it exhibited right angle structures, which was interestingly the same shape that the blood of cancer patients would have. And then natural water from some sort of natural source would always have 60-degree angles and look more like snowflakes. So one, did I capture that? Did I oversimplify it? Or is there anything you'd add to that frame of his? Because I think we might be able to use that to talk about it further.
No, I think that is the obvious baseline. That is not complicated and simple. And
Okay.
the pattern that showed up universally within certain constraints, right? Which means ultimately the right angle pattern means the water has been under stress for a long time and not allowed to move or interact with the environment in the normal way it would. I
Nope.
think that's fair.
Okay, great. So I guess one of the things I think I remember you saying was the best filtered water, if it doesn't have this structure we're talking about, that when we consume that water, it still can't pass on. There's a whole host of benefits it normally would have and offer us that pressurized water doesn't. Did I capture that?
Yeah, I think the body has to work. So you could drink any water, even like, mud puddle water. And if that's all you had, the body figure out how to get that straightened out. But the point is you're front loading the body. And if you're already struggling biologically, and this may be some of the very reason for it, is that our water supply, I mean, that was Schauberger's statement, is that if you get water wrong all over the globe, you're going to breed this energy of sickness in water for being so Schauberger used to say, so ignorant of the respective nature and how nature works, that eventually it'll turn back on you. And basically, he said 100 years from now, cancer is going to run rampant.
Hmm.
And he didn't even have a good definition of cancer. That was just degradation energy, is what he was referring to.
Okay.
Um, and it turned out to get named cancer in the end in the conventional sense, right? So you'd be hard pressed to get an American family that doesn't know somebody in the family that's had cancer, right? I'd say
Right.
that's getting up in the upper 90%.
Yeah.
So 100 years later, Schauberger turns out to be pretty correct. And then in 2000 was Schultz's work right around the late 90s. Basically he found a way to explain what Schauberger was saying in a simple way. Given we get rid of the bad, the other thing is look at the beauty in the structure of the water when you look at it when it's freed up. Like, it looks like vegetation, like the six-sided, or looks like natural. Like our water through the portable tested out and it came out looking like a sea urchin almost of quartz crystals. And without irony, like we use quartz as an amplifier in our flow form recipe. So it's like, oh, this is kind of interesting, you know.
Fascinating. Okay, so tell me what is the significance of 60-degree angles versus 90-degree angles? Like, why does that matter? What's the characteristics that differentiate the two?
Um, I think the 90-degree angles are the weakest, squares are the weakest, and triangles are the strongest. So when you go to build a building, right, if you build it without triangles, you're going to be in trouble, even though like the squares, I'm not trying to knock logic. The square would represent a very logical sense
Mm-hmm.
of being. But I think the important thing is more circular or radial or coming out from center, right? Rather than the always hanging on a sharp measurement like 60 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
But what that tells you is the electric and the magnetic forces are more in balance. That when you see a square, that's more the electric forces are dominating, and that means it was under pressure from the outside too much, and the magnetism or growth was too weak. So growth is stuffed by the outside pressure, right? It's like being on the bottom of the ocean. You get squeezed too hard.
Hmm.
So I guess we would need to understand the simplicity of the polarity of electrodynamics at the deepest level. So this is where Steinmetz and Tesla basically defined it by behavior. And I can give a couple other cute examples to kind of see how this gets messed up in our science. But magnetism is circles going outward is the primary role.
Hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
electric is lines of force perpendicular constraining the circle. And the two of those are there present all the time, and both of them can move in both directions. So we end up with, in order to be logical about the fundamental forces of the universe, we need to say magnetic is outward growth in a round form. And, when it gets off balance between the two, it renders a shape that's different. And so the square usually represents over logic and non-biological, and it's weaker in its structure. And then you get to the hexagonal,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see with graphene, and you'll see in the future all this like super strong stuff is going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
like plant-based graphene and regular graphene, and those are hexagonal layer structures, similar to what you would see in the exterior of the water, maybe like to a lesser degree in the interior in pieces. So yeah, that's the difference. The squares are basically foundational pieces, and so if you look at cells and cellular behavior, when we take cells all the way back to the beginning, it behaves like cancer, like algae, like cancer, and algae cells and fungal cells are very similar in part of the understanding. So you go all the way back to the beginning of life, and it's algae formation, and it's you got square water and you got no oxygen present, right? And then when the oxygen comes, the cells all of a sudden change, and then they start to get like instruction or articulation or coherence to form all these cells like algae or whatever now form a coherent being, or they just rapidly divide, right? So cancer is the rapidly divide. So you start to see the correlation with the square, right? That's all the way back at the beginning is breathe life, just breathe life. We need more of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then as it articulates, the shapes articulate. So they
It almost sounds to me like I think of a beehive. Like the beehives, they develop as hexagonal structures packed next to each other.
natural energy
Yeah.
of balance of, so 6 is considered the balance point, 5 is considered transition, 4 is considered foundation, 3 is the manifest of matter, the beginnings of it, but it takes 4 to do it, to get in 3 dimensions. So the mystery schools and the Pythagoras schools teach all this. You count with 3-dimensional shapes, starting with the tetrahedron, which is a 4-sided object with 4 points, right? So there's your logic in your first 3-dimensional shape. So that's kind of what's going on with water, in my opinion, when you see the squares, is it's been stressed so long and so hard that it goes back to step 1 in theory. We're looking at a 2-dimensional crystal picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's square and it's 2 dimensions. And basically the universe doesn't start counting that way, so it's stuck somewhere in the middle of struggle.
Interesting.
And back to the beginning of the struggle, right, where everything's stuck and can't form complex life.
Got it. Well, one of the things when I was trying to conceive of how I would even explain this to somebody, I was trying to think of, I almost pictured this structure, this hexagonal structure, more like a conduit. And then I kind of thought of like the square structure, almost like a racquetball court. Like there's the acoustics in there are terrible, and it's not pleasing to the ear. The sound just bouncing everywhere. It's like it doesn't. And I compared that to like the Acropolis or somewhere where the acoustics have been like the whole structure of the building or the place is designed to woo sound to travel over greater distances. And I kind of started when you describe the pressure that water is under in the pipes when we have the pressurized faucets. To me, that was the racquetball court. It's just it bounces around, and it's more of an echo chamber than it is a great conduit. And the water coming out of that is still kind of maintaining some of that, I guess, right angle structure. And am I totally out in left field? Did that make sense, or is that a good
No,
analogy?
you're right. And I mean, the water has an inertia. I think is important to say here that it develops a memory and a timing of things. It's way easier to unstick than it is to get stuck. So if water's decent, it can go through maybe, it's hard to say here what the actual magnitude factors are, but it can go through quite a bit of pressure before it totally kind of loses its coherence, right? So it can take a beating. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not like, 6 feet of straight pipe or even 500 feet of straight pipe's going to take good water and wreck it if you pump it, but it will start losing out, right? It's kind of like it's like the brakes. Your water's cruising along real good, and all of a sudden something starts to seize or bind like a bearing, and the car will start to drag and slow down, right? If we use that analogy, it doesn't mean it's totally ruined, right? And then if you have water that's short cycled, and this is what Schauberger was saying, if you do this for 100 years and keep shorting the cycle, you're going to end up with deserts, droughts, dynamic weather. Very extreme weather. It has nothing to do with global warming. It has to do with losing your buffer. Like all your shocks just went out on the globe because we're so populated and pumping water and using it so much, like not using it as a sacred, discrete element. We're just kind of pounding it around like a chemical everywhere and a commodity, right? So It takes time to cause the severity of this, and we've been doing it for a long time. And we didn't know how fast you could undo it, but in different levels, it looks like you can really undo it fast. And that's part of what, the technology is learning how to undo this stuff and then get it back like Mountain Spring Mature, right? Totally different deal than, let's just say, all right, yes, this water is structured, but how does it compare to a high quality mountain stream? It's not the same still. So what else is going on and how do we achieve that? Right. That's where the
Right.
story goes.
Okay. Well, you mentioned water having this electrical charge, or it's like a conduit to carry energy through it. So I almost picture it like, it sounds like a battery of sorts. Is it storing energy as well?
Yes. It can store immense amounts, and it can also hide them from our conventional electrodynamic instrumentation. I did a lot to demonstrate this with the plasma systems too, which are more like demonstration of cold fusion than they are like a typical heat source. They work more like a laser than they do like a flame. And then going back from here to the liquid's involved in this process where you can try and measure the energy in the water by conventional electrodynamic instruments, but you won't see it. But you will see it if you start to go into the plasma transition from the ether to the electrodynamics, right? And then there even becomes a pole in the ether. So once you allow for fractioning or dipoles, which kind of has to be to explain things to get to that 4 point of logic, you start to work with subtle energies of this nature that mirror the electrodynamics or invert with the electrodynamics. So let's say magnetism in the subquantum world may condense into electricism in the physical world when it manifests. And that's exactly what you would see. And science well knows about this birth concentration, the birth of matter, right? Matter doesn't always exist. It's always in transition, coming and going, and some is more stable than others, right? So that's a good thing to learn, is that if transmutation is one piece and manifestation is another, and water plays a role in this, that in the future you can completely redo stuff, like bring in new atoms of the liver, because the atoms of the liver are not the same atoms as the atoms that are lying on the concrete and on the ground, if that makes sense.
Maybe I'd have to put my head around that for a while, but you mentioned this idea that water's hiding something, electricity. But I've also heard it said that water that's structured. Somebody told me that doesn't actually need to be filtered because the structure of the water can do some of the work protecting you from the contaminants in the water. Is similar to what you're saying, or give me your thoughts on that? Was that a crazy idea?
Yeah, no, it's not crazy. I mean, I wouldn't give the advice to go test it out to your random person, but we've had numerous people test it with flow form technology. I've tested it myself. You wouldn't know until you kind of like a race car, you don't know how fast it is until you spin it out, right? Till you wreck it, right? You don't know where the limit is if you don't have that experience with that particular track and car. Water's kind of the same. You'd have to actually make people sick by it and then look at the threshold. So this is not advice, but this is something that triggered Andreas Schultz to do the research he did. Is he was super curious why water in nature that biologically, both with coliforms and living things in it and bacteria and all this stuff, and heavy metal poisoning, and kind of leads back to what I've mentioned earlier about the atoms are not the same all over. Science is mistaken for defining an atom as this one thing that does X. And then we get to the evolutionary point, where the water itself doesn't have this stuff in it, but it makes people unhealthy or drunk in the long term. So you drink water that's scientifically or biologically considered poisonous or unhealthy and compare it to perfectly pure water. The person drinking the pure water in the long term develops very acute health condition trouble, and the water that should be making you sick might actually be making that person healthier, even though we don't have a definition for what that actually is. Reason being is, if water senses, so water's primary job is to pick up nutrients, and it does not see poison. We see poison. Water just sees everything as a nutrient. This is my final take on what water is and it isn't. And if it's poisonous to you, the water won't deliver it to you. It's not a nutrient, it's a poison. And just like it goes in your body and cleans up poisons out of your body, which is everything you eat, a lot of what you breathe, and your body turns this into usable energies, let's just say, rather than atoms. And then the rest stays in and gets put off as sweat or out your urine or goes out your digestive system. However, right, and the water is binding that. So water becomes Velcro for toxins when it's working good and is able to read the environment of the body that it's in, whether it's, you know, a snake or a human being or the side of a mountain. As far as I'm concerned, it's all biological. There is no non-organic physics in reality when you really get down there. The earth is a living organism. Every part of it's alive, and it hosts living organisms just like our bodies host living organisms. When there is a full circle respect going on there with all the beings that live on it, human beings being the exception, and all the critters that live on our body, right? So you start to see a similarity there with water being the communicator inside and outside. Now you start getting definitions for like the description of God in all religions. And then the greatest philosophers always said that the planets are floating in a less dense form of water, but make no mistake, it's water. So what we have in the end of this whole equation is that water is most likely in its living state the physical manifest of the ether, or all that brings matter or life forward. So you basically get the definition of God in a physical form.
Wow.
And it's not male or female.
Yeah, you weren't expecting that when you talk about water, were you? But here you are.
One
Yeah.
you want.
Okay, well, so I got a similar puzzle then. So help me with this one. So I did an interview with Todd Shipman, I don't know, a year and a half ago, whatever it was, and we talked about structured water, and he recommended getting a structured unit for the shower. And so I got one, and I've three things I observed. One is I could say it's psychosomatic. The water just feels different. It's almost tingly when it comes out. But two things I did notice. He said, see, if in Florida, we get this like pink mold, I guess, and around the little tack strips on the floor, there was this pink mold ring around that. We put that structured unit in the shower, and that disappeared. And then I can go, like, I fill up our Berkey with a pitcher of water, and if I turn on the tap to fill that up, it's like I walked into a hotel pool room or something. It's got a very strong smell of chlorine. And I realized months later, I turn on the shower structuring unit, and there's none. I don't smell any chlorine in there at all. And the water tastes good. Like, the water coming out of the kitchen sink is like, oh, I don't want to drink that. The water coming out of the shower is like, I want to drink it. And maybe I'm crazy, but what in the world is happening in my shower?
Just a good example of what you talked about, that so the chlorine's pathway of transformation is accelerated. Usually, that's the type of technology we would look at in the ether. As a North Pole would be an accelerator, right? So there's a little North Pole in there going to work on the chlorine, but bigger factor is the water's basically surrounding it. Just like what you talked about, the water is capable of making a gel. You might feel this in the shower a little bit too, that you can actually feel like a slickness to the water. That's not there prior to that. And Gerald Pollack talks about this, the easy layer, the gel water. There's actual pictures of single cell formation out of water, which the outer cell wall, this really gentle cell wall that water builds out of itself to begin to form life, and then later concrete itself into a polysaccharide or a carbohydrate or a protein, right? Mostly protein, because that's what forms matter in the biological sense, is the protein. Carbohydrate gives the energy to the protein system to run itself. So very much so, you see the clobbering of the chlorine by this gel water, which oxidizes it and stabilizes it. Swimming pools, you could go in put a unit on a swimming pool wait about an hour and go back in, and at shock levels of chlorine, you can open your eyes under the pool. And like at shock levels, and normally you can't keep your eyes open. And in this case, there's still a little burn, right? But you could swim underwater with your eyes open. We were doing this to test the effects of chlorine and whatnot, how fast it responded. So, to get down into the exact pathology of the chemistry and atomics, like, takes forever to do that. We just really learned to study the whole system.
Right. Well, thank you, one, for confirming I'm not crazy and that there's actually some way to explain
That's
that
about
I'm not just imagining it doesn't smell or taste like chlorine anymore, but something's different. So
that's about everybody. A lot of people won't just structure and go drink, but the shower, I would say it's 95%. It's usually women who pick it up right away that this water is not the same at all.
yeah, no, it's definitely different. So, okay, a couple other things I want to ask you. So there's this idea you've mentioned before that water can communicate information somehow. And that made me think of homeopathy and the kind of the what we would think to be illogical or upside down kind of reality. The way homeopathy works is the more diluted the substance is, the more potent it becomes. So what is being communicated by it made me think like water's doing more of the work here than whatever the substance is. Is that likely what I'm understanding now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the whole point of all of it. Is it's not for everybody, but basically you can use almost nothing and get better results out of medicine than if you use the full physical form. But there's a mixture of that. So I don't want to say that, like, in the end, oh, you just use water for medicine and that'll be a reality in the future. It'll be probably more 50-50 or 60-40, 70-30 would be probably more the masterful type people who aren't consuming as much material, and begin to transform into energetic medicine, which is the same thing you're going to see with all this EMF stuff, the EMF pads, all that stuff. But the problem is everybody's trying to get a measurement out, which is an outward radiation, right? It's a force going outward, which is fine. But the reality is this information's all tucked inward. And so you don't measure it in the EMF. So you have to start studying what we would call the energy world or the etherical world. And that's where the real marketplace is transitioning to, which means less is more, and you don't mine the earth and consume everything and, strip everything down and run out of everything, which is, getting to be the case because that's the way it's taught and sold. It's not really the case if you apply the true physics that you and I are discussing today. If you apply that, then the problems begin to resolve themselves and you get out of the way of nature. Right. Mm-hmm. You let the canyons wiggle, right? And you don't dig a straight canal anymore because you realize the straight line is the lowest quality way. The fastest way is the shortcut and the lowest quality way, right? Because water in the ecosystem is revered for the primary energy driver that we all live on, right?
Right. Well, it sounds like we dramatically underestimated how good what we'll call living water can actually be at healing the body. And we're looking for everything else, but the most foundational thing maybe we could be looking at is our water. And we've dismissed or under evaluated how much water can help us heal. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say that's true for the entire planet, and that's our universal reality in many senses. So, the work is to kind of get it back that way. The work that you're doing, I'm doing, a lot of other people are doing is going, whoa, don't forget about the water being the foundational piece, because you all know what happens if you have a bad foundation, right? And ignorance of that foundation is a bad foundation. You have to be aware of what your foundation can handle, right? What it was designed for, where you're at with it for real, right? So a lot of people just pile on all these supplements and stuff to try and get out of their symptoms. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying those supplements are bad and don't work. I'm just saying without water is a foundational piece of how those substances are delivered and interpreted by the body, you're probably knocking off 30% efficiency at a minimum, right? So it just makes life easier.
Yeah, no, because one of the things I've been studying relentlessly lately is the concept of detoxification. And I realized that everything that exits our body has to do so through the medium of water. And yet so few people even want to talk about it, or doesn't even make it into most of the detox protocols I'm looking at. And I'm thinking there's probably nothing more foundational than getting that right. So the water can do more of the work, and you can save money on supplements or whatever else you want to be doing.
Yeah, that's my medicine cabinet's absolutely. I don't have like plates and dishes. It's full of herbs, but they've been there for like 10 years because I don't really use amount, right? I start that's not to say I won't load something in the beginning, right? I may load it really hard for a week
Mm-hmm.
and see how the body behaves with an overload of it. Or it gives me a better communication with the substance through already my body, right? But then when I start reducing it back or amplifying the signals with, magnetic reactor circuits or whatever, putting these vibrations into water, that's where you really start to see how your body can respond. And there's leaps, and this is how water behaves too. It won't respond, won't respond, won't respond. But if you just stick with it, then all of a sudden there's a step, and bam, you're on the next step, and you like wake up feeling it, right? It's not always so gradual, and sometimes it's just steady gradual, where it takes 2 or 3 years to not only repair the body or the plant or the soil, right, but to get it where it's running better than it ever did before. And I think that's what's exceptional. At 50 years old, you can be like, hey, wait a minute, my joints are better than they were when I was 24,
Yeah.
right? Because I've taken apart these. So when you start to question yourself, you can remember back,
Mm-hmm.
and you can have more fun with life because you're not walking around all straight edge, violating every one of your own rules, which might not even be the best for you anyways. Right. Like a lot of people are finding out the all vegetable diet, you just can't run from some of the toxicity that's occurring in plants. And it's really hard to grow correctly unless you know exactly who's growing it. So a lot of people are going back to meat because there's so much toxicity in the water and the vegetables, right?
Mm.
Because they're mostly water. So you got to look at that equation again, right? Like
Right. Well,
what is the water condition? If that thing was grown with bogus water, but then you'll see people soak those vegetables in treated water and get a correction. So I've seen both sides of it, right? But if you didn't know that, I've seen many, many people get sick almost to the point where it was going to kill them on eating, veggie diets, all veggie. And
mm,
I'm not saying they were doing it right. They just probably jumped right into it and didn't have good stuff. And then they start to figure out the water, or like you talked about, oh, it's so foundational. So being in this business for 14 years and talking directly to customers, I've seen so many cases where people like your water completely with the thing that flipped me around. I had cancer and I struggled with it. And then I started drinking the water and the cancer cleared. And I'm like, no, I'm like, that was the foundational piece you were missing. You were already doing all the other 6 or 7 factors correctly,
mm-hmm.
but you didn't have it on a good foundation. As soon as you slid that foundation in there, the system started to roll and you felt it right away. And then you got on the momentum and got out of the struggle, right? Which, if that energy or inertia, I call it water body inertia. And that means if you've been doing this, let's just say right angle square pattern water in your body, and you've been doing that under the behind the scenes pattern to your body, and you don't get out of that and you get stuck, that's also called chronic illness.
Mm.
Stage 4, stage 5 on the Dr. Vol scale, which he measured with voltage in the Vega machine in the body, and cross-correlated Chinese acupuncture with Ayurvedic acupuncture, and found both were correct, and both together were more effective in treatment. And that's going on in the water. So you accelerate your healing process and help change the water body inertia, right? So it's not like you can drink 1 glass and flip your whole water body inertia around. Your body has actually learned to operate in that square pattern. So you really don't want to undo these things really rapidly in the physical world. You want to be gentle and patient, and maybe realize you'll probably be doing this fun healing stuff once you get some knowledge and tooling under your belt. You'll probably be doing this the rest of your life, and it's fun.
Yeah. Well,
It's
it is.
fun.
And I guess what I love about what you just said is, as being a health coach, I have to work with things that don't have instant, oh, I took an aspirin and my headache's gone, or I did this and my reflux went away. I have to actually work at building health, and I have to manage people's expectation and get them prepared for healing over time, and just accepting that the body takes time to do that. And if you break a bone, it doesn't heal in 2 days or 2 weeks. It takes, as a process the body has to go through. And from earlier in our conversation, you talk about being gentle and nudging water and being patient with it. And it's all the same thing with healing.
Same.
Recognizing that you said 2 or 3 years. That's what a great way to take some pressure off of us that I have to heal in 2 weeks, like the marketing poster said. And I can just actually get good at patiently, tenderly loving and caring for my body, so that over time, between me and this partnership with water and whatever else I'm doing, I can actually start to heal. That was amazing.
That's perfect. That's an ideal summary you just gave to what is the point of, okay, what's the point of all this, right? Well, the point is to enjoy life more and have more fun. And if your body's feeling good and communicating well with itself and then with other people, you'll communicate better with other people, right? So it's kind of the inward journey. Water predisposes the inward journey to great depths, and then what comes back out of it is just very natural. That's what it does when you take a good deep in breath of good air, right? And that's kind of how we look at water in the long, slower, heavier inertia, right? It's heavy ether, right? But it's plasmatic too, meaning when it's alive, it's always in transition. So there's the thing. It's capable of changing, right? So how do you want it to change? What do you want to do with it beyond drink it and hydrate, right? I want to be hydrated. People go, well, I'm dehydrated, so I'm going to drink, and I put electrolytes in there, so now I'm hydrated. Well, that's not really the be all end all definition of hydration anymore. Right.
Yeah. Well, there's so much debate. Like in the world of water, there are so many different things that are marketed to us or promoted that if you do this, that, or the other to water, you're going to have healthier body. And so from whether it's ionized water or whether it's pH balanced water or whether it's this particular filter or these minerals or whether it's UV light or any different things, you and I, when we first talked, I mentioned I wanted to kind of do an episode about the first principles and defining water. And you mentioned a water tree and how if we get the foundation, well, like I'm imagining the trunk is kind of this structured living water we're talking about. And all the things we do to it after that may or may not be as relevant. If we can just recognize that the body has the innate intelligence, we can give it the best water we can give it, and then be patient and practice the compound effect. Sure enough, the body can do what it's always been capable of doing, and just be patient with it at that point, and which is a path to virtue development and all sorts of other wonderful outcomes. But yeah, what a great way to frame water as how much we've missed when we've looked into it before. Anything to add to that?
Well, I think the power of the human being and its soul and spirit structure, what you just talked about, if it's empowering if you go that way. So if you start to use this in the context that you just put it, then you can accomplish a lot more. The mental side, right? So people, I was a military guy, so there's a lot of mind over matter going on, and that's pretty amazing stuff. But I also kind of had a hangover where I used my mind to really override the body and ignored the communication. And so, you can shut off pain. I mean, it's a real thing. You can learn how to overcome pain in ways that human beings don't even understand and just keep going. But it's not wise, right? It may be a needed tool, the mind, maybe a needed thing in this course, right? But really, it's get the mind out of the way. It's the doubt of the mind that blocks you from receiving, or the disbelief, and belief is nothing. That's and then there's faith, and then there's action, and then there's knowledge, right? That's the order of progress there. You believe it, you say you believe it because you don't know it. You've never done it. And then you have faith that, hey, there's a certain principle here that I subscribe to that I don't believe it wouldn't work out, right? And then you have doing it, and at first when you do it, you're not that good, so you usually fail. But your faith carries you on, and then when you have experience or success with it, then you have knowledge of it. So everybody's on that journey, no matter what you're doing or what you're facing. But in the end, like, don't let your mind get in the way of what's going on. If you don't know, admit you don't know and observe, and you might be surprised what gets delivered to you if you just observe.
Right.
Fully.
Oh my gosh. That two biggest virtues I try to cultivate in myself and my clients is curiosity and humility. And it goes such a long way to say, yeah, I don't know, but I'm curious to keep learning because just layering this biophysics paradigm over so many topics instantly brings humility and a reason to be fascinated. So, one of the things you mentioned in there was the idea that water kind of helps communicate. And I've heard people talk about memory that water has, and whether they've done experiments where they remove something from water, and then somehow later, when conditions are right, the water reproduces something that was taken out. And I almost picture that as going on, like not just our thought life and the traumas we've had and the things we remember, but there's something actually in the water itself. So have you heard about the concept of water having memory?
Yeah, I tend to use the word inertia more.
Okay.
Because of time. Time is a very kind of inconsistent thing when we reference the 100-year life of a human being to, the time that the universe has existed. So we claim to know things. I'm like, well, we don't even live long enough to observe accurately, even as a species on record, to say what the million-year cycle is, right? So we don't know about really slow cycles. The Mayans talked about, really slow cycles of the galactic year, and then that galaxy's rotating around a universal center, right? So we're just way off as far as having any real knowledge of what goes on in the long term, or what goes on when things get too fast that we can't observe them, right? So once we get to about 10 to the negative ninth in time, nanoseconds, we're not accurate anymore. So that's we've learned how to count in exponent to 9. Gets much beyond that. We're just totally lost mathematically and geometrically. So what do we do now, right? And we're back to this no time situation where principles don't have time. They exist devoid of time, right? So water has these principles. And so the memory I call an inertia, which is kind of like a weight to it. And then it has like different layers of hiding places. And I believe it's solidly connected to the ether, which is space, which has no property, you can't measure anything. It doesn't have a dimension. That's why it's called space. And that's the thing that connects all things. So in the end, like if you study religion and all these the religions, the cruel joke is that God is nothing. It's just what connects everything. And then when you look at the water, it's kind of the same thing.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah. I
But
might have
it is when we talk about matter, right? So this is where if you want to explore the spiritual and the religious world, whatever framework or matrix you have going on there, once you get out of that, it's undefinable. So what did number 9, the natives called the walking Tonka, I think, like the mystery, it always remains a mystery, which is how we opened. So what we see is something always comes out of space and things always go back into space. It's just beyond our perception.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely open or appreciative of the reality that so much of what's real remains a mystery. I think there's more of a intelligent design behind all this organized whatever we're living in than just random chance. But I'm going to direct us back to some like the health properties, because you mentioned some stories of customers people who have used your product. So tell us about some of the health promoting benefits of what people might experience, or what you've experienced having people use water that's moved naturally.
I mean, acutely, it's probably not so much there. It's probably overall better body energy feeling, which takes you out of that stuck condition, right? And I'll even say for people who are dying, like should be dead, I've seen them like make it through that downturn, that kind of flattened out no man's land, where there's just no reason to be alive anymore because you can't enjoy an ounce of life. You're in such misery. I've seen people get through that on like water alone,
Wow.
in the structure sense, where it's like you have to sip on water all day long to stay alive. And if they don't, they feel like they're going to die.
Wow.
And so to me, like that was like, there's enough life energy in the water that these folks were able to just drop the life energy into the body until they could figure out what to do acutely to really like get out of their position, if you will. All the way down to I mean, I've heard everything because I think it's a holistic view of the whole
Sure.
body metabolism or regen or
Uh-huh.
generation starts working better. So now you get into mitochondria study and what the mitochondria does and what dehydration really is and what hydration really is. And even Dr. Krebs, even though they didn't publish the work, he basically said, "Oh, I had this cycle wrong. The carbohydrates are made to generate heat, which is one type of energy. But what's really going on at the end of the ETCs is there's a proton that comes out of there and it sucks up the oxygen and makes water inside of the cell, and that's what the mitochondria really charge up and run off of. So they kind of feed themselves through the creation of water.
Yeah. It's like there's really nothing in the realm of what would need to be healed that water doesn't touch on some level, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so the regen starts happening in every cell in the body, maybe except for the cancerous ones. But the point is like your cells that are still good aren't like defecting as much anymore. So now you're adding to your regen. Right. In the end, cancer is your body can't generically, not medically,
Mm-hmm.
but basically you can't regenerate cells. So, you know, and most people are aware that your cells are regenerated quite frequently. So you're kind of a walking standing wave that disappears and reappears in different rhythms throughout the body all at
That's a
once,
funny
right?
way to think about it. Yeah.
I mean, when I found out, like, oh, I thought like, certain cells, like maybe your skin regenerated, or maybe when you were hurt, it regenerated. But the studies keep getting faster and faster and faster on the regeneration.
Yeah.
Uh, and like livers were rumored 1 year to 3 years is the slowest organ in the body that completely can regenerate. 1 year at 20, 2 years at 40, 4 years at 80, I think was
Yeah.
some of the estimates, like
Yeah.
completely regenerate at 80 years old.
Geez, if you have
So
4 years,
so if you
you got
if
to
you got
stick
four
with it.
years left, or
Yeah.
or or we can go faster than that because those studies were done in the 70s
Uh-huh.
and there was no mention of structured water in those studies, but there was a mention of used distilled water, um, just because it's newborn and the proton energy is higher in brand new distilled water. So that was kind of the advice back then.
Mm-hmm.
But then people are seeing in soil and in the human body, we actually can get way faster than that.
Right on. Okay. Well, I heard one story. I was on your website or somewhere else. There was a guy who was giving a talk, and he had been had a kidney transplant. And he was on dialysis, and he said that structured water did more for him to got his energy back. And despite being on immune suppressing drugs, he didn't get sick in 2 years. And this is during the COVID era, where everyone around him's getting sick, and he's fine. And what I didn't know, and maybe I don't know if you've heard that story, if you know that, but the guy, I got the impression they ran the blood through a structuring unit. Was that what was going on, or was that just the water he was drinking that did that?
No, it's when they changed during the dialysis, they clean the blood, right? So they basically just filter it and put it back in.
Uh-huh.
And so in a way, yes, but it's a bigger system. And even pretty advanced universities were aware of this. So prior to that case, which we were aware of, and his thing was cramping and misery after the dialysis.
Mm-hmm.
So independently, the research doctors from a particular university approached us too and said, even though the water's chemically clean, our patients are miserable and we need to do something about it. And we've done some tests.
Mm-hmm.
And then they wanted to do a full clinical, like approved by the university.
Mm-hmm.
Then we found out that Pfizer pretty much owned the university and they came in and
Oh
wiped
man.
all the research except for COVID out. So COVID again, right?
Yeah.
But basically their suggestion was mitochondria activity picked up. And the rest of it, the cramping and all that, they didn't really know. But they had to do the clinical studies outside of the human body before they could get approved to do it on a patient. So basically they were saying, we see enough there to run this study to get permission to begin to do this to dialysis patients. but we already had dialysis patients using the technology before and after the dialysis treatment who said the difference was massive.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Well,
they
that story seemed to demonstrate that, but it was a fascinating story to hear.
yeah.
Right
Yeah,
on.
me too. Lot of little stuff like that you hear from people. And then some of it extreme where I wouldn't even repeat it, like, cancer cure that I've cured. I don't really believe in cure. I believe you've changed your lifestyle enough to maintain your body for the conditions of where you're at.
Yeah.
So many times you see that these natural functions come back,
Mm-hmm.
and stress can do it. So it's not, you might exercise and eat perfect, but let's just
Mm-hmm.
say you lose your life companion, you die of broken heart syndrome. I've seen it,
Yeah.
right? I've seen it in plants and animals and people where they lose their partner. It don't matter all this pathology and it's just their
Yeah.
being, right? Their soul, their spirit, wilts because of that situation, and you can't do anything about it. And there's a time to go, right?
Yeah.
And my thing is like, animals, which, I work on more and test with more, is I'm not trying to keep them alive forever. I'm trying to make their quality of life better for me and them if I'm
Mm-hmm.
their caretaker or oversight until it is time for them to go. And I've had really good luck with it. Um, all my animals that were ever suffering that I had full jurisdiction over, I didn't know how to do much with. It was more like, try this, try that, wild slingshot, this stuff work, this stuff's crazy, I don't know what it's doing, to a simple, consistent, what is the reality method that we can do here. And I can honestly say, like, animals that were scheduled to die in a couple of weeks often went on to live 2, 3 years later. And when they died, they weren't in any severe suffering up until the day they died. So
Wow.
to me, that was okay, this is working and this is working simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like some really complicated situation. And human beings, there's plenty of them doing. There's a lot of people who do the water plasma through the Brown's gas channel, and George Wiseman, he does a decent job of sending that out into the world. However, my warning is to keep in mind what medicine is and what your daily routine is. And medicine, by definition, is not used
Mm-hmm.
in excess, and that means frequency. Like, do you do it every day? Because if you do it every day, it ain't medicine anymore. And how much? And if you do it into excess because what you were doing isn't working anymore and it's dose, so now you increase the dose, it's all going in the wrong direction now. It's just a matter of time before that actually becomes problematic,
Yeah.
becomes the poison that you're trying to avoid. So
Wow.
like Paracelsus said, and water's a good example of this, like, there is no such thing as a toxin or a poison. It's only the dose. And
Right. And to your point, frequency of it. Now, if taking drugs as a lifestyle, you've shifted a whole reality here. And cure is such a loaded term. It's and there's so little nuance in using that. And for that matter, the pharmaceutical industrial complex has captured it as solely their property and no one else can even use it. So what a hairy situation to think that maybe we should just talk about healing. Maybe we should just talk about feeling better and measuring. Do I have more joy? Is my heartburn gone, or whatever the things it is that we.
I'm not against metrics, but they'll kill you in the long run if you get caught up in the metrics, because metrics are isolated pieces of a broken whole.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to look at the whole. If how do you feel? So we had like some, let's say, some capable mineral water stuff. I'll give you an example of a story I heard. So there was in South America where the cancer wards are kind of like hospices a little bit more. So a doctor will volunteer in a small community and take care of 20 people in a ward and go around and do their, blood work and, wherever they're at, they're on chemo or whatever conventional treatment there is. So we did a guy was kind of at the end of his ropes. So we got involved in a little observation of a mineral water, and the guy happened to get up 5 days later and leave the facility. And he was there for a couple years, I guess, and he was too sick to leave. So he leaves, and I was working with a clientele down there, not this individual was in the cancer ward, the clientele down in Central America was. And so he calls and he tells me what the doctor wants to talk to you. So the doctor says to me, "What's going on? Like what happened here? The blood numbers changed drastically, like quickly." And the patient got up and went home and said they weren't coming back. And she wanted to
Fantastic.
she wanted to know what happened. And I said, "Well, I don't know what happened." I'm like, "Your patient tell you what happened." And she says, "What? Like the blood change? What can you tell me what's changing in the blood and why?" And I said, "It's just cleaning up the blood, and everything's going to go all over the place. The body's going to do all sorts of different stuff as it's cleaning up and rebuilding,
Right.
right? And your metrics will get you all confused in here. You'll start chasing stuff around like, oh, this went too high. Now let's give him this pill or give him that or whatever, and just let it go. Let the body do its own thing." And she said, "Well, you got to give me some explanation so we can work with this." And I said, "Get the explanation from and pay more attention to your patients." I go, she was like, "How do we know this is actually working?" And I said, "Because your patient went home and sent us a video of him dancing to music while he was sweeping the street outside, like 2 days after he had been bedridden for 2 years from your chemotherapy."
Right.
I go, "That's the question
Yeah.
that
Measure
you should
that.
be answering. Measure your patient's feeling, right?"
Right.
And and then there's the harder side, right? Where, you know, you got to suffer a little bit. Like if you want to build muscle, you're gonna have to kind of
Pick up
tear your
heavy
muscles
things.
down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So not everybody can go, "I feel worse, I quit."
Right.
But you can develop your intuition,
Yeah. I love
right? And
how
and
your study of mystery has led you into a philosophical look at science and at what the human condition really is. That's that's awesome.
I dug into it. In the end, I was like, and I had a knack for finding the best books written where it did
Hmm.
answer a lot of my questions, but couldn't answer them all. And then going to the person who wrote that book and meeting them in person and ask them the final questions and how the conversation always ended. So we don't really know.
Yeah, and it's okay that we don't like
Yeah,
it. It's
perfect.
fun. If we knew everything, life would be pretty
Yeah,
boring to
yeah,
your point. Like it's more fun to have
yeah.
mystery
It's
and to
perfect.
be constant seekers of what is actually going on and what's real and
And
how do we live a better life.
to have your own journey, right? Like
Yeah,
you go do this stuff, and if it doesn't work for you, what's great is, especially with water, is there's about 1 million more ways you can approach this that may work for you better. So like,
yeah,
there's no reason to be disappointed if a method fails. But if you work with water and you do the less is more, your
yeah.
failure rate's going to go down quite a bit.
Right. Well, okay, speaking of that, I could talk to you all day. So I've got some people with giving me pragmatic questions here that want some John Butts wisdom. So I've heard that if you have structured water, you don't need to drink as much. So is there some truth to that? Or what's what is there a sweet spot? And we often hear you take body weight and you correlate that to how much water you should drink. And what would be your thoughts on trying to create that sort of equation for hydration?
Use your intuition first before, and you'll make your own less is more baseline. And some days you need less and some days you more, but 100%. Um, it's like eating food without mineral. Your body's hungry after the meal because it's hunting for the minerals. So you eat more to try and get more mineral in there so it can process 1/3 of what you just ate.
Ah,
Same exact equation going on here.
with
And there's
water.
different types of waters, right? So if you get once your mineral liver reserve is up good, you don't need as much water anymore because the water has the mineral. If you're detoxing and flushing out, the distilled water or the RO water structured will do it can hold more, right? It can hold more inside and lock it in.
Hmm.
It's a scientific thing, measurable. It can hold more of a concentration of mineral. So, you can get it out better, right? In the end, when your body fully comes around, I would say an athlete who's expending and sweating or working out, like your intake goes up, right? Because your
Right.
ejection of water goes, but it's probably like half. It's probably around half. So people drinking a gallon of bad water a day and flushing themselves out too much and having negative effects, like when they start to structure water, they're not doing heavy exercise, right? They're doing light exercise like walking or whatever. 2 liters
Yeah.
And when we get into the really
Yeah.
charged water, like in the winter, we go into compression like and dehydrate in the winter compared to like the spring. So
Mm-hmm.
there's this Ayurvedic behavior where everything's going to dry out, us included, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be more dehydrated. Well, that's allowing everything to kind of reset, right? Over wet for too long is bad, and over dry for too long is bad. And everybody has different how to constructs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of more of a dry construct. I stay lean, right? I don't
Mm-hmm.
hold a lot of water, so I'm very sensitive to water over and under.
Hmm.
And you might even say I spent most of my life dehydrated because I didn't drink a lot of water because I didn't intuitively, I just didn't like the water, so I didn't drink it.
Uh-huh.
And then I had an experience with living water when I was like 24. Actually, I had experiences with living water, but not of this level of quality. Well, I was fishing, right? You get thirsty
Uh-huh.
and you run out of water because you fill your canteen up with that crappy tap water. And back then, I absolutely refused to like pay for water.
Mm-hmm.
So back then, when I was a professional hunting and fishing guide in wilderness, that's what I did after I got out of the military, and I probably learned as much from being out in the wilderness as I did from nuclear power training.
Wow.
Different side of the coin, but I drank water out there straight from the river all the time, and it's loaded with bacteria and living things. I mean, but your body just knows, right?
It's
It's like
structured.
there's
Yeah.
a magic thing going on there, and your body just knows. So I had no idea. I was like, man, that's a shame. There's like 6 billion people on Earth, and like you got to kind of hike out but no, later in my career, I'd contribute to maybe changing that a little bit. So that moment was a life-changing moment, and I couldn't describe it to anybody what I felt like or what happened. There's no words for it, but
Yeah.
I knew at that point there was a different thing going on by experience, and kind of now I know what the water's capable of in nudging you towards your thing. And I would say the number one factor here is your intuition. If you choose to work on that aspect and you believe you can communicate with water, believe, you don't even have to have faith at this point. You might get faith from like studying Veda Austin.
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't really go too much into that layer. I spent about 5 years there with my water plasma systems and communicating in different ways. And now what Veda is doing is very interesting stuff. And there's something there. Everybody should look at that there is probability evidence scientifically that you can communicate with water. She's even going into almost developing a hieroglyphic language that's repeatable, which
Wow.
is communicating in a very deep, complex way, like handing a novel to somebody, having them read it, and then coming back and having a discussion about it, right? That in my prediction, that's where she's going to end up at the end of her career with that study. So I just kind of observed because I already knew it was going to happen long before she was doing it because it happened to me in a different way. Um, and it was almost like you sense that this is knowledge, not your like unique experience, and you sense that you are being given this knowledge by some entity. That it doesn't matter to me what that entity is. It could be water, fine with me if it's water, because that's where it's all coming through, right? And you're able to take that and share it off to where like my whole growing up was more right, left brain, right arm military, where if I had a pain, I would just say that I don't acknowledge that as anything
Mm.
significant. I just keep going.
Yeah.
And I lived a life like that. But then as I started to work with the water, it kind of tore me back down and went to the other side of the coin, which is the only reality to the human being, not the human body, but the human being is feeling. That's the only reality. Eyesight, smell, taste, touch, they're all tertiary and they all come to the center of feeling. So you
Huh.
see something, it's the feeling that's the visual incites the feeling, which is the reality. The taste incites the feeling, the smell incites the feeling, right? And I also learned this in ayahuasca in a very like deep way of how feeling is the only reality of your being, which is more of a female aspect. So right? It kind of helps merge the male female understanding and consciousness. And then your intuition like really gets good. So like you want to talk to your liver, Like, it doesn't talk in English, but it'll tell you what's
Talks and
good for you.
feelings.
Yeah, it'll tell you, and it doesn't have to be pain. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be pain. And I always thought, you had to wait for pain before a part of the body was talking to you, because otherwise you don't feel anything. And it's like, oh, this is a totally different thing. So
Uh-huh.
there's the biggest benefit, is you become more aware of your own body
Mm-hmm.
and how to operate it. And then how you operate your body and how you think, which is
Mm-hmm.
also operation, right? You're choosing what you think in many senses. You're in control of that, right? It's not a belief anymore. It's your knowledge that you control your own thoughts, and you control what you expose yourself to, right? So your thoughts will reflect the TV if that's all you do, is if that's your life
Mm-hmm.
observation, right?
Yeah.
Your thoughts will also affect, if you're out in nature all the time, that's what your thoughts will reflect. So the environment you choose to put yourself in is a lot of what the computer spits back out, right? So the mind is part of the whole body, and an etherical thing. The brain is a computer that is able to record and hold information and spit it back out when needed. So that's the biggest advantage here, is if you operate your machine better, your biological machine better, and you're in a better mood and you're happier, guess what? That transfers in resonance over to the people you're around.
Yeah.
And you don't want to fight them with force if you don't like what you're picking up from them. So you relocate yourself, because you're mobile still, right? I got to get out of here before this goes bad, right? I'm not
Mm-hmm.
driving good with this. You hear it all the time, people talking like this. But if you ask them if they thought it was a fact, no, it's just a belief I have and I operate. But it is knowledge, because that's what they operate by, and it gives them better odds in life, right? So other people say that's impossible, but doing the
Yeah.
water relationship, faith to knowledge, belief to faith to action to knowledge thing, truly makes you more intelligence, which is awareness, not smartness. And you get your computer brain out of the way, or monkey mind, some people call it. And then you can start to progress with anything. And creation, I think, comes into play, where time zeroes out and you start doing more creative things with your life. And
Wow.
I believe we're in that transition, and I'm just, a part of where the water's flowing, and I'm not denying it. And I'm not afraid of what to say, because my knowledge of it is a lot deeper than what I can communicate and say.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm comfortable, with it and sharing that journey. And I believe I was given those gifts. I don't have knowledge, but I know I was given those gifts instantaneously from choosing to
Mm-hmm.
focus on water and its ability to do this, and my knowledge of that. So it was like one day I was like, oh, now I know I'm doing what I'm doing with my life. Like, I always used to wonder, what am I going to do with my life? I'm doing this, I'm doing nuclear power. Now I'm running around the mountains. Now I'm, building race cars and working in steel mills. And what am I going to do with my life? And, building machines was one thing, but I also had this thing where I was kind of contributing to the machine,
Huh.
like the
Yeah.
machine that's eating off of everything.
Yeah.
I was like, that doesn't feel right to me, to support this big industry that I know is like the heavy polluter. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? This is
Parasite.
where it's too much, right?
Yeah.
And they're the ones who plug up the technology when you tell them, hey, we don't have to mine the earth the rest of our lives. We're not going to run out of anything.
Mm-hmm.
If we do this right, we can
Yeah.
actually grow this stuff if we do it right. At the same time, I realize, the human race collective hasn't really kind of got there. Maybe if it can just respect water. So I'm in the right channel of just gaining more respect for the planet. I don't know. People are always going to take their technology and the mining over it. But if they understand that water is like the mother and the womb of everything universally, in the sense of a formation of the planet and biological life and more so-called advanced beings like we're supposed to be, that we at least can make that change. And I don't care if everything evaporates tomorrow, you do the right thing. And once you get involved in that, life's more enjoyable in the moment, and you'll start taking better care of yourselves. And you won't freak out if you're over a straight edged on, having a beer every now and then. You're like, don't give too much power to these single things that, a lot of people out there say, oh, you can't heal if you do this. And it's like, do this when and how? You know what I mean? If you do, you can go get radiation poison once and it'll have a positive effect on your body. You do it every day, it'll kill you. So
Yeah.
it's all a matter of your own freedom, and you earn it, and the results you get from it or give you the reality how good you are at it, So
Wow. That was way more depth than I was expecting on how much water to drink. That was amazing. So, well, then I
well, it's
guess
the
the takeaways,
whole
intuition, right?
conversation, right? Intuition. Develop
Yeah.
your intuition. You have to as a human being. I heard somebody say in a pretty advanced discussion that if you don't build your own matrix, the matrix will build yours for you.
Yeah.
And nobody really likes that, being locked in a cage, right? That it has to be done this way. That's what the matrix is, right?
Yeah.
And you build more and more rules until eventually all the good times are ruined for everyone. And it's like the universe will take the matrix that's here and slap it right on you if you don't show the wherewithal and the freedom to build your own and build it well, right? If you build a shittier one, it's just going to fall down and be replaced by the one that already exists.
Wow.
So the health matrix, the money matrix, the fun matrix, that's all yours to create. And that's the real end game of, which is you'll drink the right amount by your own doing. And like, you should get hydrated at certain times of the year and dehydrated at relatively, right? You're breathing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The water breathes. And that's our point. When the water's not breathing anymore and it's flatlined and it's square, now you're adding a load to your body. We work with a doctor, Ayurvedic doctor, who was a nephrologist conventionally, and he's the guy who kind of got involved in all that kidney study and interest. And he basically says you don't want to have to digest your water to get your body to use it. He's like,
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Because it has to take it apart and put it back together in a way. In other words, it has to structure it.
Yeah. Your body could use that energy for something else. So why not put the structure in place to begin with? Yeah, okay. Well, that brings up a good point. So how long does water stay structured is another question people have wanted to know. Like, do I have to drink it right away, or can I sit there for 5 minutes or 5 hours, or what's the story?
It actually gets better when you let it sit.
Oh, good to know. Tell me more.
Yeah. So let's just say you put it in your fridge overnight and drink it in the morning. It cools down, it degasses, it evolves. We actually scan this. We have scanners that can look at the structure. It doesn't really tell us what the structure is. It tells us how the structure is changing in its rough size, right? And we can see only so far into it, right? So we can see maybe 10 miles microscopically and 10 miles telescopically, and after that we can't see anymore. But we can see down to the oxygen level, where oxygen will start playing a role in this, and you can see the bubbles change in the water. So it'll develop a lot of bubbles on the glass after you destructure it. And when those bubbles start to go back in, that's the water getting fully matured. But we can't really do this in line rapidly, right? So there's a difference between like the trigger effects that fix the water, increase the oxygen, smooth out the water, make it taste better, and then the finishing of the water is a whole nother thing. And so basically, if we use the normal parameter, the structure goes up and down over the course of a week, and it's always changed for good unless somebody like radiates it, heats it up, anything that would cause separation or heat.
Microwaves it.
Yeah. Any radiation or heat, right? So a cold process is going to preserve it. Minimizing the heat, minimizing the radiation, or minimizing entropy, right? And so entropy is energy that the water doesn't need or can't use, and that's a physics term where the system cannot use the energy. So it's called entropy. Enthalpy is the energy that's usable by the system, and the water can draw that from the ether. So it doesn't want, once it's going, it doesn't want any more outside inputs unless we're getting into programming or telling the water what to do. Like, let's just say we're programming it with a color frequency that's associated with the chakra, that's associated with an organ, and that energy center is messed up. So that's kind of where I'm at. And that's like 200-300-year-old technology, like on record.
Okay. So if we structure our water in the morning, we don't have to worry about it being unstructured by evening, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Simple answer.
Very cool. All right. Well, one more question. Is there anything I forgot to ask you that would be important for somebody to know? Where do they go to learn about structured water?
We do, pretty good education at naturalaction.com. There's a section called the Water Vault out of the navigation page in the upper right, where we have more presentations and about 15 hours of webinars that are very technical. So
Okay.
what you and I talked about today can come down to measurements, and metric systems and managing your own health and seeing stuff a lot faster and using your intuition and using old school stuff that's body holistic, that's simple, cost effective, and different versions of it. So some people are more intuitive, some people are more metric. So I give you real world methods of, all right, get your water structured, start playing with this and start measuring your body baseline. And when you get good at it, you won't need to measure anymore. You'll realize you're using how you feel as a gauge for your, if you want to assess yourself on how well you're doing in life and your evolution and your joy of it. And then there's a bunch of definitions like you talked about and technical stuff and deeper layers there. And then I would route people to, Victor Schauberger on water.
Okay.
More conventional people that like are at the university level, maybe Gerald Pollack. That would probably about do it. I think when you get into the other avenues of it, starts going down too much of a rabbit hole again, stretches it out. So Victor Schauberger and Gerald Pollack are two bandwidths of written conventional to etherical teachings. Probably from Pollack to Schauberger would be the order, and then implementing what Schauberger was talking about. And I get into ennobled water, which is Schauberger's version of turning medicine spring water and trying to replicate that in the home. He said back in the 30s they used to hike up to the mountains. He was taught this, so then he learned how to replicate what he was taught to a reasonable degree. And that's a bit about what our technology is about, is replicating nature and bringing it into the home. And that should be good enough.
That's plenty. I'm sure if anybody wants to geek out, they have a full buffet before them. So, all right. So tell people a little bit about the technology, how to find you, follow your work, that sort of thing.
Naturalaction.com or naturalactionwater.com is 100% the best way to, and I'm pretty accessible. And then we do everything from home, portable travel units, compact, light, all the way up to commercial grade systems for agriculture, whatever. Since I came out of, process engineering at the nuclear power level and grew up in heavy industry at the steel mill level, there's not much I'm discouraged about building or designing, or haven't already done. With water, it kind of has more focus there.
I love that, especially for agriculture. I didn't think of that because I did an interview with Zen Honeycutt and we talked about how polluted our food system is, in particular, like the potatoes, and some of it's the chemicals going through the pipes, leaching all this heavy metal, putting it into the food. And to think that you could structure that or use some sort of living water to help grow food, that's even wow, now we're really solving some significant problems. So bravo, John. I love it.
Yeah. There's solutions in the study of biology for all that stuff. In other words, nature will take care of most all these problems if we don't
get in the way.
Yeah, exactly. If we get out of the way and start copying the way things are done in the universe, and it'll be just fine, and then at least we've chosen collectively or had leadership that said, hey, we should probably go this way with the future of these things. Regardless of whether the planet, goes into decay and dies or not, when you're done with the journey, your own personal journey and your contribution outwardly, you kind of want to be able to say, I feel like I did the right thing, without the fear of, we're destroying the planet and it's all going to be over, and this fear-based thing, right? That
and I think it's so dramatically underestimated, especially once you understand a little bit about water, just how capable the human body, the earth, is at healing itself. And this whole scarcity fear nonsense that gets pushed on us is just laughable once you scratch the surface of understanding what we talked about today. So, John, thank you so much for taking this much time. I really have appreciated just hearing you wax poetic. I've appreciated hearing you geek out on science and help me define terms and just get my head around this wonderful world of water. And the ways that we have underestimated how much it can help the body heal. So thank you so much. And it's been a great pleasure talking to you today.
Yeah, much gratitude to you and the work you do, and the time you took and your interest in it. Really, really appreciate it. It's good stuff to share. So without that avenue, there wouldn't be much purpose to, what I've done, so sharing it's the deal, and much gratitude for people who are willing to help share kind of way down the rabbit hole and way eccentric of the normal discussion. But I think it's needed to make the changes to do the right thing. So thank you for help doing that.
You're welcome. It's been an honor to amplify it. We'll talk again soon.
All right. Take care, Christian. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Deconstructing Conventional. If this conversation sparked new questions or helped you see things in a new light, feel free to share it with a friend who is on a similar journey. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode and a perspective that challenges the norm. Check us out on our website at healingunited.today and find us on social media at Healing United, or you can check out the Healing United PMA app. It's a great way to stay connected. Remember, question everything and rebuild intentionally.